Welcome to the Amiga Ireland podcast. I'm Jarlath.
And I'm Luke.
I'm Rob.
Rob, what have you been up to?
Apart from the baby stuff and cleaning up a vomit and all that kind of stuff, trying to get rid of a couple of little niggles in my hardware projects. So I've got the wonderful Tony Wylan, the WinUAE guy anyway, and he's helping me out with a couple of things that
cool.
I've...
Yeah, I've seen Tony Wylan's name pop up in a few things.
He does firmware for the ACA 500s as well, so he's doing the software end. Jens Schoenefeld does the hardware end, and so it's a pretty formidable team.
How about you, Luke?
I've been trying to promote the Polish Army Party. I've been trying to do it all over the net, mainly on Twitter, Facebook and Google+. I hope information regarding that party goes to as many people as possible, so that was my main thing.
And you get a good crowd at Army Party, don't you?
Yes, and I hope we will get even more people, including you guys, both of you.
Someday.
Yeah, hopefully next year for me.
Fingers crossed.
Did the guys say in the interview that you get about 100 people or plus?
Yes, that's, between 90 and 100 people.
Cool.
So not too bad at all. Not too bad, I must say.
Okay, yeah, it's cool. Well, I've gotten a few goodies in the post that I'll talk about later. And also
toys.
Yeah, some nice toys. And also some the plans for the next Amiga Ireland event now are in the works already. And that's on the 19th and 20th of January 2018. So if you're interested in coming, anybody listen to this, it's in the centre of the country, not alone. You can go to amigausers.ie and you can purchase your tickets there. It's going to be great fun. More details about that in a little bit. Okay, let's go on to the news. A new power adapter for the Commodore 64 is in development, and we'll have a link to this in the show notes. This is well worth checking out. It was Daniel Seigenek in Galway here in Ireland who put me onto this, so thanks Daniel, I'm very excited about this. This will plug into your Commodore 64 in a normal spot, and it's about the length, it's about an inch or something in length, and then at the other end what you've got is a USB socket, so you'll be able to power your C64 via USB instead of using the traditional brick.
Very clever, very clever.
And I hear a rumour there might be Amiga ones coming along too, which would be amazing.
I think they'd be a bit trickier now, but because the C64, and from looking at the VIC-20 stuff from the last time, there's a 9-volt AC and there's a 5-volt DC. So 5-volt DC, that's your USB straight off, but the 9-volt AC I think is only used for peripherals like certain tape decks and stuff like that. So if you're using one of these SD card adapters or something like that, you probably don't even need it. So straight USB would do it.
Interesting.
Amiga's a little bit trickier than that, but it's still doable. It'll be interesting to see if something like that comes along.
Right, there's a second thing. We've got a saying in Poland, like Commodore is, always alive. So we've got a saying like Lenin is always alive, no matter what you do. So Commodore is, again, another incarnation of this company, is alive. So
like a zombie.
Yeah, like a zombie. And Lenin, in this case, is like a zombie as well. So Commodore is back again, this time with mobile phones, which is very, very interesting. They come in two colors, in white and in black. They are very similar, I think, in appearance to iPhones, but they apparently run Android, and there's an information in the show notes that you can buy them actually on Amazon. But if it's true, I have no idea. And how reliable they are, I have no idea as well. It's just an information, but we'll see.
You have to wonder if it's someone just sort of, making a quick buck out of the name.
You mean exploiting the name? This is what I would call it, yeah. Actually, because there have been so many companies called Commodore so far, and none of them succeeded. Actually, none of them had been able to repeat the success of the original Commodore, started by Jack Tramiel.
True. Some Aminet news. There's an RNO comic reader, basically like an app that allows you to view comic book files. And these have been around for a long time. These comics distributed for reading in a browser or on your computer. And but it's a new reader, and it's available on Aminet for Amiga OS 4 and for MorphOS. You can check that out. But it looks quite good, and it claims to read all the main formats that they're distributed in. So if that's your thing, well, worth a look.
Okay, cool. That's interesting. I've been on AmigaLove.com, and in Trick 8 has a really interesting post there titled Amiga 1000 Kickwork. It's a single boot disk magic is what he calls it. So when the Amiga 1000 shipped, I didn't realise this until I read in Tricket's blog, but the Kickstart code was a little rough around the edges. The Kickstart was actually on floppy. So you had to use one floppy to load the ROM, another one again for a workbench. So there are solutions then with ways you can get around this. You know, you could get a hardware solution. You could add a ROM chip to it, say, using an adapter. But there's a nice solution here that's been developed. Basically what this does, it was a company called Amigos Corporation based out of New York, wrote a piece of software that after you boot the machine, you run their software and it will pull the Kickstart out of RAM and write it to a floppy disk. But it will also include a stripped down copy of Workbench on the floppy disk. So it means you just get to boot off one disk instead of having to do disk swapping or anything like that. And it's actually still available. I'm linking to the Amiga Love article here where you can see all about it, and a link to where you can actually get this today if you have an Amiga 1000 and something like that interests you.
I remember something similar Piru has done some time ago as well. Rob, do you remember that?
Rings a bell. I can't. I was just trying to think myself. Yeah,
that Piru is a Finnish programmer, very very talented one. I think one of the best from the Morphos team.
Yeah.
As far as I remember, yeah.
I think he also did. Is it Blitzkick or one of those?
Yes, Blitzkick is his as well, and CNET Ethernet driver is his as well. Yeah. And as far as I remember,
some pretty serious stuff.
Yeah. Exec 44.1, very very good module for Blitzkick. Mm-hmm. So a very very talented person, I must say.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so this new Phase 5 reincarnation that has cropped up a while ago, and it's a bit of a strange one. This one, basically, it seems that this ex-employee of Phase 5 has bought up their rights and the name and has started trying to reproduce the old hardware. Now that's great, and if it ever comes to fruition, that'll be amazing, because Phase 5 made some of the best accelerators of the whole Amiga time. So it would be, they did the Blizzard accelerators, they did the Blizzard SCSI kits, they did
Cyberstorms.
They were the only ones to bring PowerPC accelerators to the Amiga at the time. So they were a serious company back in the day. And this new thing, I don't know. It looks a bit strange. But anyway, they released some price lists, and they plan to reproduce a certain number of all the old accelerators, all the old parts, and so the prices are expensive as you'd expect, but they're probably comparable to what you'd pay on eBay for a 20-year-old version of the same thing. So, it's probably not that crazy. We've yet to see anything from them other than some blank circuit boards. And anyway, have a read about it yourself and make up your own mind. But I would say if these things arrive in the shops, then this will be brilliant. My money would say they won't ever do that, but if they do, I might even buy some. If they do, they're a very, very good kit. The top end one, a remake of the Cyberstorm PVC2. So that's a 604 chip, in PowerPC terms is old, but that was the top accelerator you could get for the Amiga 3000, 4000. They're saying they're going to produce 499 of them at €1,490 each. Serious money. They do sell for that at second hand if they're in good shape, so I suppose might be worth a look.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah. I'd say the most common one from all them was the 1230. I think almost everyone knows the 1230 is kind of like probably the most popular Amiga 1200 accelerator. It's sort of like the ideal sweet spot. And they're talking about remaking that as well for €400. Be good to see.
Ami Sampler 2.0 has been released. Any of you who watch Amicast TV, run by Johnny Amiten, will already know Johnny, who develops a bit on software, on the Amiga, and also does regular streams weekly, at least weekly. This program, Ami Sampler, is actually quite cool. So when I was in Tenerife last, I actually got to see this thing in Johnny's house, and it's absolutely deadly. You get to assign samples to different F keys and different keys in the keyboard, and it will loop some of them if they're drum beats, and it will just summon individual samples if they're if it's instrumental or music or whatever. So you're able to construct a tune on the fly, basically. So you could go and DJ a gig and do a damn good gig with this. It was really, really good. Now, I haven't actually used it myself, but I've watched Johnny using it in his place, and it was absolutely fantastic. It runs on an 030, the minimum requirement. But that was a few years ago, and version 2.0 is just out. So if you're into music and you haven't tried Ami Sampler yet, I'd encourage you to give it a go.
Good stuff. I've seen, I think, was that what Ravi Abbott was using when he did his session at Christmas there? He did a sort of a DJ set of mods.
That's different. So if you want to crossfade two different songs, you use something like PT 1210 or something, that'll help you mix two tunes together. Yeah. So like what was going on there is the songs are already constructed and you're basically just crossfading them, between one and the other. You're beat matching the tempos a bit. Yeah,
beat matching.
But this is actually to construct a tune, so you could be playing away and you could decide to drop everything except the kick out of a song and just keep the kick going, and maybe the bass all of a sudden, and it'd be nice atmosphere. Anyway, if you've got control of your lighting too, which most DJs who are doing big gigs do, you'd usually drop the lights really low and suddenly you've just got the bass going for a second, then you'll bring the instruments back in one at a time slowly, all that kind of stuff you can do. You're kind of composing the song from loops on the fly with it.
On the fly.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah, very good.
Also, I forgot to mention this in the last episode. I'd been talking about it so much outside of the podcast. I thought I'd already mentioned it, but the Amigos ran a charity event called Amigathon, and they streamed this live on YouTube, and they did something like 12 hours worth of videos or more of them playing games, and this was continuous with their friends. So they took a list of games from people who donated money, and they played a couple of minutes of each. It was really enjoyable, actually. It was good vibes. It was like the old telethon days we had here. The guys are quite funny. I remember at one point, one of the guys goes, "Oh, we've crossed the 600-pound barrier," and the other guy goes, "Sounds like my last diet." I was in stitches laughing. So yeah, they were really good. But it was really enjoyable. And since then, they've broken the videos down into individual games, I think, into smaller sections. So that's worth checking out on their YouTube channel. So well done, guys. Also, something I didn't think I'd ever see, Commodore 64 virtual reality goggles have been created by Jim64. These things are brilliant. The link is in the show notes. You really have to see this to kind of believe it and to get it. So it's and he has wired up the Commodore 64 to a VR headset with screens inside it. And then to take it a step further, he's actually created a game. So he's figured out the whole left eye, right eye thing, and he's figured out how he needs to adjust the picture on each screen to make it appear three-dimensional. And he's written a game especially for it. So you can go and check out his video on his page, which will be linked. And his game is called Street Defender. And that was by Jim64 with music by Nico64. And it's absolutely cool because basically what they've done is they've kind of created a new platform for C64 games. So like existing games would be, probably a bit pointless on this, but you could possibly spawn a whole new genre of VR / virtual reality style games out of this. So it's very, very interesting to see where this might go. So well done, Jim and Nico. That's pretty cool.
That's mad. When I hear that, it's Commodore 64 VR goggles, the image immediately in my head is some guy with a CRT strapped to his face. It makes a lot more sense to do it the modern way.
Yeah, and a neck brace.
Anyways. Yeah.
Also, Adam Spring has written an article describing Friend Up, what it is and what it isn't. It's quite a good article and it's posted on medium.com, but this article is a really good read and has embedded videos in there where you can see all that stuff. So this is a nice kind of canonical source for anyone that isn't clear on what Friend Up is and why it's really interesting and really important and how it's connected to Amiga in a very big way. You can check out that article on medium.com, which will be linked in the show notes.
For anyone who has the ACA 500 Plus accelerator, which is a very impressive external accelerator for the Amiga 500, it adds a whole lot of functionality. It's a very impressive bit of kit that sort of takes complete control of the A500 motherboard and lets you adjust a lot of different things on it, but also lets you add Amiga 1200 accelerator, which is great. But there's new firmware has been released for that. There recently it's got a load of bug fixes, but one of the key things in it is that it allows you to set up a compact flash card as a hard drive basically automatically. So you just you choose a Workbench 3.1 setup, and it will go and it will unpack all the disks, it will do the installation, and it will even partition it as a hard drive for you, which is very clever. Nice. And, saves a lot of faffing about, because I kind of take it for granted because, I've, set up hard drives on Amigas for 20 years. But, someone who's only ever had floppy disks and stuff, it's a bit unintuitive sometimes. And this is, it's a great thing if you just want to set it up and set up your WHD load system and all that. So you just stick a CF card in it, choose your setup from the menu, and away it goes.
That's very good, yeah.
But yeah, and the ACA 500 itself is such a great bit of hardware. Like it lets you use two compact flash cards, and one as a hard drive and one for swapping files between the PC and the Amiga, which is extremely useful for transferring over games and swapping images and swapping files between WinUAE and the Amiga, for example. But it's a great bit of hardware, and this just adds an extra layer of polish to it. Makes it really accessible.
I think I've also seen guys connecting ACA 500 and ACA 500 Plus to their Amigas 1000, as far as I remember.
Yeah, I don't know if that's officially supported, but the slot on the 1000 is basically the same as the slot in the 500, so
yes.
I can't imagine it not working.
Yeah, but I think it's upside down, as far as I remember.
It's backwards, so...
backwards,
so,
yeah.
So your accelerator is still the same way up, but facing the other direction. It's just on the other side of the computer, basically. So that's all. But yeah, it should work. In theory.
Okay, let's move on to games. Thalamus have announced that they are going to release Creatures 3 for the Commodore 64, which is fantastic news. So there's a blog here on commodoreformat.wordpress.com. Thalamus created some really great games. When I got my first Commodore 64, it came with the Night Moves pack, with the Mindbenders pack. And one of the games in there was Snare, which was an amazing sort of puzzle game by Thalamus.
Oh, I love that game. That was a great game. Oh, I'd forgotten about that.
Yeah, there's not much like it now. I always loved that game. And then, there was the other one on the Commodore 64 that came on cartridge, Flimbo's Quest, which is also by Thalamus, I think. So they've made some really good games, and they are going to be releasing Creatures 3 for the Commodore 64, and they're running a Kickstarter campaign. So there'll be a link in the show notes to this as well. We can check it out, but it's great. It's great that there's so much great stuff happening for Commodore 64 at the moment.
Absolutely.
And I think all the games released by Thalamus, they are, like quality games. Creatures 1, Creatures 2, as far as I remember. Nobby the Artwork as well. Very, very good, very, very good game. And I'm really, really glad that this company is back.
Absolutely.
Quality stuff.
Yeah, and that they're targeting the platform. Like, they could have decided we're just going to bring it to mobile now and get people that way, anyone with a bit of nostalgia. But the fact that it's actually
iOS or Android, I absolutely agree. Again, fingers crossed.
Okay, games released now called Hermes, which is an interesting idea. It's it's in sort of somewhere between the 8 and 16-bit fashion, and it's a platform run and jump kind of game. And the idea is you're a chef trying to catch a chicken and kill it and eat it. And that's basically it. But it sounds great and looks great, and it seems to be ported to practically every platform you can think of, which is amazing. So that the music straight away is straight out of any good Commodore 64 game. It's really good sound, and it appears to have been ported, or in the process of being ported, to almost everything, including Haiku, which rarely shows up in these lists, and Pandora and Dreamcast. All these exotic platforms. So, but yeah, definitely worth a look.
Cool.
Argus is a really good and new RPG game for C64. I think there aren't that many RPG games for C64 apart from, I think, Elvira 1 and 2. This game is adventure, a role-playing game, as I said before, and you have to explore the lands of Argus that span 1,500 locations. And the quest is to find and free the captured Star Child. The game has absolutely stunning graphics and very atmospheric soundtrack. The price is only $4.99 American dollars, so for that price, it's really worth checking out. Of course, the link will be in the show notes. I remember one more game. I don't know, guys, if you remember it for C64. It was a newcomer. I think it's a Hungarian game. And it really spans like 10 or 12 C64 discs. But again, the game itself is absolutely astonishing.
Yeah, no, I don't remember it.
Yeah, me neither.
But sounds very impressive.
If you haven't, please have a look. It's really great.
I must start picking up a few of these Commodore titles. I haven't actually bought anything except for the Commodore 64. I haven't gotten anything new in, well, possibly ever, actually. I think it's all old stuff I have here, so I must start.
Yeah, the game base, if it comes to C64, is just, it's huge, the library. And the new games are coming as well. They are really, quality games.
Some of them are on cartridge too, which is nice. Kickoff Revival has launched and a community site has been set up. So it's, well, this is not an easy one to... KORMUNITY. So it's Kickoff Revival community.com. You can see top goals as well as videos showing the gameplay and the controls and how to get into it. Thanks to KO2 Cup on Twitter for pointing that out. And KO2 Cup are the kickoff community based in Ireland here. So it actually looks like a very decent game.
Let's go to discoveries then. If you're interested in archaeology if it comes to programs or games or demos, there are two interesting sites. Games that weren't for C64 and Amiga games that weren't. And this site is full of pictures, descriptions, stories of games that might have been released for these two platforms. I have encountered a flashback version actually for C64. At that time, I remember that flashback for Amiga was, absolutely stunning game, and it's still, up till now, one of my favorites. So there are some pics of flashback for C64, so if you have a little bit of time, do check it and see the pictures, read the stories. I'm pretty sure you won't be disappointed.
Cool, thanks for that one. Yeah, flashback would be so cool on the C64.
Oh, I know.
I found a cool Amiga hardware website. It's called retro.68k.pl, and there are some really nice devices here you can buy. One thing you can get is an Amiga 1200 power floppy and HD LED board replacement. So those three little lights in the top right corner there, you can get a replacement component for those. There's also an Amiga RGB to buffered VGA composite and S-video adapter, which is pretty cool. He has stuff for the Amiga 600 as well. There's chip RAM and stuff like that. There's a boot selector for the Amiga 600. I hadn't come across these kind of things before, so you might find something new there.
Yeah, there are a few good things they've had in the past as well, like things that like mouse adapters and compact flash adapters and things that make sort of simple, well, relatively simple things, but that make a big difference to the usability of the machine. That's like the video adapters, like the hard drive adapters. Very, very useful stuff, and it's a really good website.
Right, if you are into a demo scene, particularly into C64 demo scene, there's been a demo released and it's called Quad Core by Singular Crew, and it was released during the Function 2017, a Hungarian party, and it's an incredible demo done for Commodore machines. I have no idea how they managed to synchronize it and how they managed to do it, but it looks really, really well and sounds absolutely really well as well. I haven't seen anything like that before, to be honest. 4 Commodores synchronized in a demo.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd heard about it. I haven't actually watched it yet. I'm going to go and watch that afterwards now. But it sounds like an amazing piece of work.
The Amiga Ireland meetup is happening this January.
We have some great workshops, guests and gaming competitions.
And most of all, we have a lot of fun and pints. Visit amigausers.ie to book your tickets for January 19th and 20th in Athlone. See you there.
I mentioned at the start that I got some nice deliveries in the post. So the first thing I got in the post was an AmigaLove.com sticker from Intric8. So thanks Intric8 for sending that over. Eric, who runs the site, just put a post up there saying, I've got a load of these stickers. Send me your email address, send me your postal address, and I'll send one out to you. It's proudly on the back of my laptop now, and it looks really cool. So thanks for that. And another thing I got in the post, we spoke a few episodes back about the A1200 Bitfrost, which basically it replaces the lights, the 3 lights on the Amiga 1200 for power, floppy and hard disk, and you can program them and set them to do kind of, they can do kind of little routines like fading in and out and stuff like that. By default, it looks almost exactly like your original ones, but you can change them. There's a huge selection of colours, like something like 20 or 30 different colours you can pick from, all kinds of shades. And then you can also adjust the brightness of each individual one, and you can set different patterns. You can have them fading in and out or blinking and stuff like that. Considering how little it cost, it was less than €30. It was something around €25, I think, including postage. It's fantastic for what you get. They don't, radically change the machine if you're kind of like attached to the old sort of, if you're a bit of a purist when it comes to the appearance and stuff like that, they don't take away from it too much, I find. So they're well worth checking out.
Do you guys remember the Commodore format magazine? It was at some point in the 90s. It was very popular in the UK. Very colourful, very knowledgeable, and the style of the writing was very witty. And I remember when I was back in the days in Poland, and some of the magazines we were actually able to buy them in some sort of a kiosk with foreign papers, and I really loved them. I really enjoyed reading them, even though my English wasn't, that good at that time, and it helped me to extend my vocabulary as well. And I found a site that shows all the covers of the Commodore format magazines. So again, if you like archaeology, computer archaeology, do have a look.
Very nice. Yeah, I loved the Amiga format. They had a great, format to the magazine. There was a nice bit of banter and kind of humour in there, as well as covering some kind of technical stuff too. And then Linux format that came after that. So they were nice.
There was PC format as well, and was there an ST format? I'm pretty sure there was a range of format magazines. And so eventually the last one left was PC format, but Linux format came kind of later. But they're all sort of a similar style. They're all well written, and a nice. I find it a nice read.
Very nice layout as well, and very colourful, very nice.
There's a rumour that one of the Amiga format staff are actually thinking of coming over to the Amiga Ireland meetup in January. So that was something I saw on Twitter. Yeah, so that'd be really nice. One of the editors.
Which one, or is it a secret?
It doesn't have to be a secret. I suppose it was on Twitter. Nick Veach, who was and he was.
Oh yeah. He was
and he was with Linux format as well. After that, he wrote some excellent. There was a piece in Linux format where they would have a kind of hot picks, so they would kind of show you software you've never have heard of doing things that you mightn't have come across. Like things like thermal imaging stuff or mad stuff like that. So he always kind of surfaced, even when he stopped editing the magazine, he always surfaced these great articles from time to time. So that would be cool. Yeah, and if you're listening, Nick, we hope you can make it.
Fingers crossed again. Mm-hmm. It's the third time in this show.
I think there's a bit of a running theme in this episode of computer archaeology, but there's a website here with a lot of old manuals that have been scanned in for old, mostly 8-bit computers, but there are some Amiga manuals in there as well. But a huge selection of not just like technical manuals and service manuals, but also how to program kind of books. And that was a big thing back in the day. Sort of Linux for Dummies kind of things. But there were loads of them for almost any computer you could think of and almost any subject. And there are loads of them on this website now that are scanned in and available to read, which is fantastic. There's just a sheer volume of them. And they're sorted by platform, by manufacturer and by computer type. And they're, dozens and dozens of books.
Nice.
For the teary-eyed nostalgics.
Nice.
Useful thing.
Mm. Absolutely. And the technical manuals are always, are ever more useful when these machines are starting to break down and that. Actually, and there is another site that I have that has a lot of the old schematics and stuff. It's an FTP site, but it's Zimmer.net. But you can search it and find it, but it's a similar idea. It has a lot of the more technical stuff and less kind of user-orientated stuff, but also a useful one.
I found an interview online on amitopia.com. It's with Zahir Sai, who's based in Syria. And it's quite an interesting interview. He's into 3D graphics and you can see some of his work there. And he talks about the shops they had there and how he encountered it. And I really find it so interesting, for somebody from a completely different country, how they encountered the Commodore machines and how it affected their lives. And even, in some cases, their careers, were influenced by Commodore stuff. So the link to that will be in the show notes. It's a nice long read as well. So there's a nice upload on Aminet that I've come across. This is called Directory Opus 1541, and it allows you to use your Commodore 1541 drive with Directory Opus on Amiga.
It's interesting because I know there are various kind of hacks and DIY projects in the past to do that and to let you connect those kind of drives to the Amiga's parallel port. I think is that what this one's doing? But it's nice to have it, integrated into an environment like Dobus. It means it's sort of a bit more substantial work gone into it. That's excellent.
Let's see. Also, I found some voice synthesis software for the Commodore 64. So I was actually looking into Amiga Say. This voice synthesis for C64 is called Sam. And there's also another one called Big Mouth. And it's really interesting to see them. So I have a link to the YouTube video here. The sound quality is not that far behind Amiga Say that came with Workbench back in the day. So yeah, mad.
Yeah, impressive. I'm not entirely sure if I've mentioned this in the previous one, but anyway, I think it's worth mentioning again. But Usborne, they made a lot of very good, kids' educational books and, sort of fact books for kids getting into programming and computers and electronics and all that kind of stuff. And well, into any subject, like they have a huge range of books and going all the way from young kids all the way up to, second and third level chemistry and physics books. But they have released all of their computer programming books from the 80s on their website as PDFs for download. So if you wanted to type in an old adventure game or, have a go at programming your C64 or an emulator, they're all worth a look. And it's so much nostalgia there.
Yeah, the Osborne books were amazing.
Yeah, they really were. They were very, very well laid out, very informative, and sort of loads of colourful pictures, and they were always really, really good. And that's where I learned all my electronic stuff, and all how that got me started out in programming.
Brilliant.
Back when I was in primary school, yeah, because we had a bunch of them in the school library, and it must have taken them about 10 times each.
I remember a guy in my class in 5th class, I think, he had this Osborne book. It was a detective book, how to be a spy, and there's all kinds of ways for how to, to create a secret code, a cipher, so you could write a letter that only your friend could decode, and, how to use drop-off points, and, oh, Jesus, absolutely brilliant, at that age.
Yeah, I know, they're fantastic. Another one on the technical end, there's a website have published the schematics and the related files for the Picasso 4. So if anyone remembers that was kind of the you could say the ultimate graphics card for the Amiga back in the day. So it's an original 02, 03 graphics card and with 4 megs of video RAM, and it's a very good card. And they go for crazy money these days. But having the schematics and more importantly the firmware files and things like that, all the stuff you'd need to repair the cards is all on the website that's linked to in the show notes. But it's a great resource if that's your thing.
Nice. So I was in the museum, the Computer and Communication Museum of Ireland recently, and we've been building up a Commodore and Amiga section there. So it was actually already set up by the museum. So we've just been kind of adding a few embellishments. But I met someone there called Diarmuid Keeney, and he used his VIC-20 way back to control a robot and entered this robot into the Aer Lingus Young Scientist Award back in 1987. And he used the VIC-REL as an interface to do this. So he's actually posted a photograph of himself as a kid submitting this project. It's brilliant. He's sitting on a chair looking proud as punch of this little robot that looks kind of like C-3PO. I can only imagine back in 1987 seeing a kid wheeling this thing in. They must have thought, man, this guy is Mensa material altogether, like, you know.
Yeah.
So like the
brilliant.
That interface, this is an extension or an expansion, or whatever you want to call it, for the VIC-20 called the VIC-REL, and it's from the wiki page. I can see that the intended applications for this were things like burglar alarms, door locks, remote controls, and stuff like that, ventilators, telephony. But this thing actually moved around on its own. So the link to the Facebook page is there. You can see this robot that was made with, and it's got a VIC-20 taken out of its case. So it's got a VIC-20 motherboard and keyboard strapped to it. It's brilliant. I get a real kick out of that. Fair play to you, Diarmuid.
Awesome. Yeah, that was you just took that one stage further than I did at that age. I would never have gotten anything resembling something that could be shown off in public. But that's very impressive. And
did you have a VIC-20, or how far did your Commodore experience go?
I had an Atari 800 XL, a little bit older than the Commodore 64, but similar spec, if you like. I had that connected up and doing all sorts of, controlling model railways and things like that, but nothing that ever left my room.
Okay, let's go on to community news and events.
Right, first off, we've got past events, and there are 2 events. First one is River Wash in Poland, and I took this one because of one thing, and that thing is a great demo by Elude, Demo Scene Group. The title of the demo is Rise and Shine, and it's got a really great presentation of different styles, and it's been released for Amiga and for the PC, which is very, very interesting, which doesn't happen very often, but that's the thing that I wanted to emphasize on. The other one is Data Storm. It's a demo party that we mentioned in the previous episode. During that party, a lot of Amiga demos were released, and they are really worth checking, especially demo called Naughty by a group called Nature. So the links will be in the show notes.
Okay, so upcoming events, we have 3 upcoming events. First, we've got RetroComp / Load Error, and this is happening on the 20th to the 22nd of October this year, 2017. Luke, can you help me with the pronunciation? I know it's in Gdansk, but...
Scena muzyczna is a music scene.
Music scene, okay, in Gdansk, in Poland. And this looks like a brilliant event. There's going to be lectures, seminars, gaming compos, concerts, live DJ acts. They've got 2 separate halls. They've even got accommodation, so they've a sleeping room, showers. Okay, hang on, I'm not sure if a sleeping room is actually accommodation or a place you keep during the day for a little nap if you need it. But they've got showers, lockable cabinets, free parking will be provided, and there'll be catering there. And the ticket prices range from €1 for a temporary visitor period on one of the days, which is just €1. It's €10 to go for one of the days and €20 to go to the whole event. And the link to that will be in the show notes. Coming up much sooner, as you're listening to this podcast or as it's being released, it'll be the following day, Friday, October the 6th in Ireland. The Commodore Story, which is being the documentary being produced by Stephen Fletcher of WaveM Studios, is recording a meeting with the Irish Commodore and Amiga fans in the Computer and Communications Museum of Ireland. The link to that event will be in the show notes too. Of course, in January, we're getting the wheels in motion, as I said earlier, for the Amiga Ireland Meetup 2018. You can book your tickets at amigausers.ie. The event is on the 19th and 20th of January. The tickets cost €30 for the 2 days of event, the Friday and Saturday, or 15 for just the Saturday. We'll have games, guests, workshops, spot prizes, and of course, general good cheer. So if you have any interest, make sure you come along and book your space. The tickets are definitely limited, just down to the size of the venue, and you don't need an Amiga or a Commodore to come along and enjoy it. You'll be able to play a few games regardless. And that's it for the events.
Okay, so Ask Amiga this episode, taking a question from the Retro Computing Stack Exchange site. And this question is, I have a Commodore PET that doesn't turn on. What order should I start checking things in? For example, power, components, etc. Now, I'm not wholly familiar with the PET. I've used one once, but I've never actually pulled one apart. And so, basically, I can only go on what would be general advice. And, well, you start off with the very, very simple stuff, because you'd be amazed at how much time you can spend trying to find a problem when your power cable's broken. Basically starting there, but the power supply is always a good place to start. And so it's an internal power supply on the PET as far as I remember. And, you just need to have a check of that and make sure all the outputs are as they should be. At this stage, it's a very old machine, and if it's the original power supply, the capacitors in it are probably knackered, so they're definitely worth replacing. Any power supply that's over 20 years old is going to be having trouble with capacitors. They have a pretty important job in power supplies, and they smooth out the rough, nasty mains electricity that's coming in. So once that's been set to a lower voltage, it's still quite noisy and spiky, and they bear the brunt of that noise, and they smooth it out into a nice, clean electricity for the computers to use. So it's well worth having a check in them to make sure they're still in good shape, and replacing them anyway. And quite often that can bring a power supply back to life. But you do want to make sure that the outputs are as they should be, because if you have had problems with the power supply, the output could be completely out of spec and might have even damaged the rest of the computer. So you want to sort of isolate the power supply and make sure that it's working separately before you move on to the rest. After that, you need to look at the machine specifically, and usually again, capacitors in an old machine, but you need to have a good look at the schematics for the machine, and have a look at things like the reset lines, have a look at the interrupt lines and the data bus, and just see if there's any activity there. The reset lines will always have a sort of a very simple pattern that's a power up, and sometimes it's quite a simple fix if they're causing problems, but it quickly gets murky, and you need to have sort of specific knowledge of the machine after that. It can come down to having a good look at the schematic, figuring out what signals go where, then checking that each chip has got power, having a good close look to see if there's any corrosion, especially if there's batteries or capacitor leakage, or, if it's had liquid spilled on it back in the day that's slowly been corroding contact somewhere. Socketed chips will oxidize over time. So, if you can reseat all the chips that are in sockets, and especially on the old machines, these sockets are, they can be quite bad just from existing, just from being in the air, they oxidize, and you can lose contact with the chips that are, even if they feel physically firm, it's very good to take out each chip and carefully put it back in. Now, that's not for the faint of heart, especially for rare chips, but it's, they're the basics that cover a lot of old computers at this stage.
Okay, yeah, thanks for that, Rob. That's really thorough, and it sounds like if you're asking that kind of question that they're asking, that they might need a bit of help.
Absolutely, and that's what I'm saying. Someone who has, a bit of experience with this, before you go breaking stuff. Replacing capacitors is, it's not for the faint of heart either. It's not a difficult job, especially on the older stuff. It's quite ezy, but you have to know what you're doing. So practice on an old VCR or something like that first. that's always my advice.
Okay, we've got some listener feedback. So a few episodes back, we talked about Keir's Flash Floppy program that was available on GitHub, and he's got some other programs there. And the message we got was, thanks for the compliments on your podcast. I guess that's Rob Cranley on the podcast too.
Yep, that's me.
Yeah, you have your answer, Keir.
How are you?
Keir goes on to say, he's a good guy. I see him a lot in the FB group. Cheers, Keir.
Yeah, I'd say the same about him. But he's a good guy. Thanks very much.
Yeah, definitely. Two guys doing great stuff for the community. Let's move on to our polls. The poll last time we asked, which Amiga systems do you love? And we had 38 voters in this. And at 53%, with 30 votes, classic Amiga OS came out on top, running on 68K. Second place at 25% was OS4 on E08 machines, which was interesting, followed by Morphos at 16%, Aros at 4%, and then another 4%, which is 2 votes for things like Linux, NetBSD, etc. Thanks to everybody who voted.
And we've got another poll. This time, Rob has a poll for the choice of workshop presentation at the Amiga Ireland Meetup 2018, and the options include a soldering workshop, introduction to programming, and more. Do check it and vote.
This is also slightly different. It's on Facebook because it's part of the Irish Amiga Facebook group there. But it is also an open poll, so add your suggestions. If you have an idea for a technical workshop or a presentation that you'd like to see at the meeting, by all means add it.
Lovely. Well, that's all from us for today. Music was by Virtual Dimensions and banjo guy Ollie. We're going to play out with a song by Tomas Petio from Hungary. He's done a brilliant cover of The Last Ninja 2 theme tune on guitar. Lads, do you remember that game?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. Absolutely great. One of the greatest games in C64.
Wait till you get a load of this. Thanks everybody for listening. Bye for now.
Bye-bye.
Bye. I'm not very good today.
It's all good.
Sorry.
It's all good.
It's good for bloppers.